the time. We have for the first session failing miserably here, so let's get rolling. So I'd like you to actually, since now you've heard from us who we are, you heard specifically from me who I am, and also a little bit about my background with this region. So I'd like to just very briefly hear from each of you. So with various purposes. For one thing, just introduce yourself in terms of the name that you'd like me to use. So so I'm assuming we're all on a first name basis. So my name is Matthias. I'd like to know what the counterpart of that is in your case, since your names have different structures given the local peculiarities. So that's one motivation. The other motivation for doing this is also I'd like to get you into the habit of talking. Right? So you all should say something at the stage, namely what your name is, and then also what you do for a living and why you are in this course. So why don't we start over here with Dan? Yes, what you do for the other parts.
Okay.
So you were focused on the name part now, but also say what you do for a living and why you are in this.
I'm Danny, and I'm the legal manager at Runway Group.
And why are you taking the floor?
Basically, basically I saw the title making presentations, and that is something that I think would be very useful to be a leader in the future.
Actually, I'm in the auditor and also Cameron from investigation. So I joined this team leadership because sometimes when I was in the job, I also this difficult situation that I need to make some decision whether to continue from investigation or because everything is not fair. And then in the group, right, also need to handle our teams well. That's it.
So let's just say you don't have to get up because I want you to be comfortable speaking from where you are. So it doesn't have to be a formal act, so just remain comfortably seated.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is, as you see, Wong Xiaoping, but you can call me Winnie. Yeah, you can just call me Winnie. So actually I'm working at the IT department for Survey Group. So basically why I'm interested in this topic is because I felt as a leader, as a manager, when you handle a group of people, we always face difficult decisions that we do not know how to respond to. That's why when I see the structure in this course that we will have to go through different scenario and case study, I felt it's a very good way to learn how to apply our knowledge in this kind of scenario.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Tony. Surname is Fu. I'm working in the company called Sunway Marketing and Berhad, member of Sunway Group. We are trading in building materials primarily. My scope of business are mainly construction-based properties. And why I attended this, interested in this course, because it's making difficult decisions is one of my core daily routine, because I kind of managing quite a number of people under me, and also managing suppliers and customers. That's where there are so many difficult decisions need to be made, because human behavior sometimes. So you have to interact with them, so you have to make a decision whereby issue arises from everywhere. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nizam. I'm from Jeffrey Chow School of Medicine. The reason why I chose these topics because we have 3 centers to manage and at 3 different locations. So sometimes I do need to upgrade and also get my staff at par of the tomorrow. And also the problems at different centers sometimes can be heavy. So I need to know some tips from this.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Faisal. So I'm from Sunway Property and Facility Management. The reason I take this course is because I saw the opportunity to learn better communication and decision-making skill. So I really hope that this will give me tools to have better decision-making skills.
Good morning, my name is Danny Chan. I'm the Group Senior Director for Masa Group. I'm responsible for the overall business operations of the group. So I think every one of us here faces difficult situations almost every day. So I'm here to learn from everyone, not just from you, from everyone from different areas of responsibilities. And since most of the team here are from the Sunway Group, so I'm very keen to learn how you do it. So yeah, that's the reason.
Hi, good morning. I'm Kava. My full name is Nawamani. Call me Kava. I'm the Senior Manager for Education and Course Management with Jeffrey School of Medicine, Monash University. I work with Niza, and basically we manage 3 different sites in our school. And managing people is always been a difficult task. And making decisions in some of the scenarios that happens on a day-to-day basis can be challenging, so that's why we're here. That's why I'm here.
Let's move over there.
I'm Ru. I'm the director of the A-Levels program. I like the team, particularly on managing and balancing it with moral challenges, because in my scope of job, I'm actually not just concerned about professionalism and excellence in performance, but I like the component of handling it and balancing it, particularly how do we, when we are bombarded with moral issues, how then do we balance it?
Hi, my name is Israel Keys. I'm the founder and CEO of a fintech startup, so I feel like I have to make some moral decisions around money and people all the time. And so I look forward to hearing and learning more about this today.
My name is Lele. I'm the Director of Marketing in Sunway Education Group. I hope to gain some insights about the process of making the right decisions. I want to get insights into what is the right decision? How do you define right decisions? And in whose perspective right means?
Morning everyone, my name is Shirley. I am actually the Senior Recruitment Manager for Sunway Group, the group HR team. So we're being in HR because we are gatekeeper to hire the right people. So I guess there are a lot of decisions that you need to make while you are making sure that you're the gatekeeper for the critical SOPs, which needs to be, you need to align to it, but at the same time you need to apply some moral decisions as well, hiring people using certain justification, the right one. Pretty much right.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Mandy, you can call me Man, with an N. I'm a pharmacist, pharmacy managing training and education in my team. My team has about 90 over staff. So to attend today's training and to learn how to handle moral challenges as well as ethical issues, because there's a lot of time that we need to make decisions and also manage the team's behavior as well. So I hope to learn something.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dr. Lim, but can call me again to discuss because I'm not a doctor in this class. I'm a medical doctor working at Sunway Medical Center, Wellness Center. So what attracts me is more on the handling of moral challenges when we face facing patients, and also actually for my staff, how to handle my nurses and all that.
Hi, I'm Serene. I'm from Sunway Medical Center. I'm a nurse. Why today I'm here is actually, to be honest, I'm being chosen to come for this class, right? And why I need to be here because I find that myself is very confined to my nursing management. So I would like to come here to learn from every one of you how to really manage people with this.
Hi, my name is Fong. I'm coming from Sunway Engineering. So I'm a project manager at Sunway Engineering. It's a construction arm for Sunway Group. So what caught my attention is the difficulty of making decisions. Well, one single decision in construction line can cause millions. So this is what makes me choose this subject.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Jessie. I'm from Human Resources of Sami Construction Group. So basically for me, in HR or in our daily lives, you're always, challenged to make moral decisions or something. So I would like to gain more insights to see how, we can really make such effective decisions.
Hi, morning. My name is Jane Ho. You can call me Jane. I am the Senior General Manager for the Group Brand Marketing Accounts for the Sunway Group. I also hold the role of Administrator of the Jeffrey Shah Foundation. So I have a lot of conflicting challenges to manage. But I think echoing a lot of why we are all here today, as we move along, we are facing more and more difficult decisions and the balance. How do we please everyone all the time? And you can't. So that comes to moral challenges that we have to sift out. That's why I'm here. I hope to gain some insights into that.
I'm Jimmy Lim from Sami Construction Group. I'm the project manager. So the reason I choose this course is because we know after we make the decision, how do we feel? Sometimes there are a lot of stakeholders, our clients, our consultants, even our subordinates who force us to make certain decisions. So after making the decisions, the difficult decisions, what a way forward.
Hi everyone, my name is Wani. I'm Group Auditor from Sunway. I'm also currently an MBA student in Western University in Sunway. Leadership is definitely one of the focus of our research now, and also that as we are leading teams, leadership is an essential skill that we will apply in very important.
What are the overall challenges in my field of work? Hi, my name is Rusna. You can call me Rusna. I am
Only name that you listed.
That's my
This is
name.
really
Only 6
straightforward.
letters. So I am the manager for corporate affairs, corporate sustainability and events for Sunway Group. And then why I choose this topic is basically because I need to get some insights on balancing between ethical and practical decision. So this is why I'm here.
I am thinking similar to Rusna. I think it's basically balancing between the two. Because I'm from summer engineering construction, in this line there are a lot of these difficult decisions being made because you need to compromise sometimes safety, sometimes the speed of the progress. So the reason I'm here is to find out if there's any framework that we follow to make that decision and to make us feel more comfortable making those decisions. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Wayne Kai. You can refer to me on the last part of my name, Kai. I work in Sunway Group in internal audit. To be honest, this course was selected for me, but I think it's relevant to our work. Actually, on a daily basis, I think we'll be faced with sometimes pretty sensitive issues, and I'm interested to see how we can make certain decisions, whether to bring up or surface certain sensitive or confidential information. And I look forward to this workshop. Thanks.
Good morning everybody, my name is Michael Dent, you can call me Michael. My primary objective for attending today's session is to stay out of jail and to continue to stay out of jail. I'm currently the MBA program leader here at Summer University Business School, but before that I had a real job in the corporate world, and I often had to make a lot of very tricky ethical and moral decisions, which twice nearly got me in jail, and once upon a time I nearly got shot down by an F-16 as well, so it should be a very useful class for me.
Okay, on that note, let's move right in. So I already said a little bit about what to expect from an ethics class and what not to expect, certainly the kind of thing that we do today. Of course, you can think of ethics also as a line of theoretical inquiry, right? That's a perfectly sensible interpretation of what the subject matter is. It's not what we are doing today. So what we're doing today, practical ethics, is the kind of thing that starts within situations, right? We are thinking about certain scenarios, and we are asking, if I were that person, what would I be doing? Right? So notice, this is a question different from what would I do if I were in that same situation? Yeah? So you've got to actually understand the situation through the eyes of the person whom we're encountering there. Yeah? So it's important in terms of the learning that we are doing there. We understand the situation, but the situation is already given to us as presenting itself to a particular agent, which in this case happens not to be you, but somebody else. And then the learning is supposed to be happening through a transfer of you then reflecting about that situation, as we understand it, first of all, through this other person. It's easier that way because you are who you are with your background, but you're not in that situation, right? So you have to make a transfer from what's happening in that situation to somebody else and think through the kind of advice that you would give to that person and learn in that way. And so that is the point of case-based discussion, to understand them from within. And they always have a very thick context. So the way we are thinking about that is there is moral frameworks, there is moral distinctions, there is moral concepts that have a general nature and that one can introduce at a certain general level, but they live in these situations, they need to be applied in these situations, they need to enter the life of a practical agent, as you might say, at that particular moment, as of course you all are also in your particular context. So the situation that we have here, so this case is called The Woman in the Corridor. By the way, this case and also the third case that we discussed this afternoon, the corruption case, these are cases that actually have been written up by students at the Kennedy School. So these are people who came to the Kennedy School, went into a degree program at the Kennedy School, also took a class on this kind of material and practical ethics, and then basically gave something back to the machinery of that particular course by writing up their own particular case in order to allow others then to engage with their case and to advance their own learning in this case. So here we have a case that plays in Cambodia. So Cambodia was already mentioned earlier. So it's in your neighborhood, right? Even though of course a country with a very different history. There's a narrator in there. I think this version of the case that you have, the narrator's name is never mentioned, but her name is Anne. So Anne is somebody who went to Cambodia as a journalist and journalism teacher, and then after that, right after she was done with that, came to the Kennedy School, and that was also where she wrote down this case. So this place in the 90s. Of course, what matters there, you probably all have seen this photo at some point, right? There's the sad history of Cambodia. So I'm showing you a famous photo that documents the sadness of the history to also get you a bit into this mindset, right? That this is not an innocuous scenario. This is a scenario that plays before the background of a very painful, violent history. So Cambodia in the 1990s is only 20 years after this. So to this day, when you visit Cambodia, there are these famous, there's these killing fields to be found. So every place in Cambodia, every village, every city in Cambodia has a killing field where in the 1970s the Khmer Rouge executed it's a double-digit percentage of their own population. So in terms of percentage of population affected, this is actually the worst genocide we've ever had. Right? And there's other genocides setting different records, but in terms of population killed, this is the worst. Right? So fast forward in the 1990s, when this case plays, the leadership structure basically just got settled. So somebody who basically was a junior member of the Khmer Rouge regime that committed these atrocities in the 1970s had established himself as the prime minister after the Vietnamese had withdrawn. So Hun Sen, who's here in the middle, who still is the prime minister of Cambodia, right? So had emerged as the uncontested leader by this time, but there's all sorts of political upheaval around because not everybody is happy about this. Not everybody is happy about this to this very day. So this is a screenshot from September 2017, right? So there's ongoing issues in Cambodia. It's sometimes closing down a newspaper for some phony reasons, but it's also university teachers are getting killed on the street, and then somehow a story is fabricated as to why this was because of some gambling debt, even though the person was never in a casino in his life and things like that. So it still is pretty bad place. So this is it's not quite as bad anymore as it was in the 1990s. Yeah? So that is the background to this case. So let's think a little bit about the characters involved here and the questions that are coming up in this case. So this is in a way a wonderful case to get one's ethical reflections going, also because it's written up in such a way that it leads up to a question. Yeah? So at the very end of the case, you have this question here: Chantou's leg, however, was not quite infected. The fixator on that leg needed to be removed, and she needed a bone graft. It would cost about $3,500 to $4,500. But if she didn't have the operation, she was going to lose her leg. Could I pay? That's the question the narrator is confronted with. So let the question. So you've read the question before, so I know it's already ruminating in your minds. Let it ruminate some more. But let's think a little bit about who is involved here. So what do we learn about the narrator? What do we learn about Anne? What do we learn about the person for whom this question arises? Who is she? Nobody remembers anything about her. You have read the cases, right?
No.
Who has not read the cases?
Just got it yesterday. Very late.
So none of you has actually read the cases?
No. Got it pretty late.
What is this morning?
You got it this morning.
It's my first time looking at it. I got it last night, but I did manage to browse through. I got it last night.
Okay, this is actually really a problem because the whole structure of the day is based on the fact that you have read the cases. Yeah, but the whole point of this is, so I was told that you would be getting the cases several days in advance, and I confirmed that last night. So, and the point of this is that a lot depends on the subtleties of these scenarios, right? So to understand the thickness of a context, and if you okay, so what we have to do is we'll have to replan the day then. So you should use the remainder of this session for reading this case, and then we'll let me think about how to redo the day in light of that. But definitely, so it is now 10:10. So we have our officially started. When's our next session at 10:50. So read this case until 10:50, and if you have time left, also read the Prison Master Dilemma case, and we'll most likely simply skip the second case. Right? So the woman in the corridor and the Prison Master Dilemma, read those. Try to read them as fast as you can, but also the point of practical ethics is to pay attention to the details of the case. That's what is quite important. So it's not a matter of giving a synopsis. Okay, please do that. Okay, it's now 10:50, so let's see where we are. So who has completed reading the case Woman in the Corridor? Okay, who has started to read the Prison Master's Dilemma? Excellent. Who has finished reading the Prison Master's Dilemma? Okay, so chances are we need some more reading time. Is it realistic for you to finish reading the Prison Master's Dilemma in the lunch break? So the lunch break as officially scheduled is 1 hour. So yeah, so okay. Okay, then I'd say what we'll do is we are now then back on track in the sense that we are starting our second session. We'll cancel the official program for the second session, so we're not going to talk about the German airliner scenario, so the second case we're just not doing. As time permits, I'm going to say a little bit about what the role of that case in the program was meant to be, and maybe you can read on your own then in the next few days. And all the slides that I will be using or would have used for that case will also be available to you, so maybe you can fill in the bigger picture then on your own. So we'll talk about the Woman in the Corridor now, and then with the third session we'll be on track again and we'll talk about the Prison Master's Dilemma. For the fourth session I can actually improvise, so I can tell you what the case is about. It's the Myanmar case. That's not these two cases, Woman in the Corridor and Prison Master's Dilemma, they really depend on the thickness of the context, right? And that's not the case for the Myanmar case, so I'll fill you in about the relevant parts of the Myanmar case. So I think we'll be fine that way. Okay, then back to my question here. So this is now you know that this is how this ended, right? So our narrator is confronted with this question here: could I pay? Right? Could Anne pay? So let's gather some information about what's going on here and who these people are. So what is it that you have picked up about Anne? What do we know about the narrator? What is relevant about her case? About who she is?
Well, she's very caring, and she's obviously getting involved with the people that she meets.
Yeah, she is very caring. Yeah, she gets connected to people. Why is she in Cambodia? What do we know about that? What's she doing there?
Hey, that's good. Yeah, why is she in Cambodia?
She was doing humanitarian work.
Humanitarian work, yeah. What kind of humanitarian work, Danny?
I think it's not just the work, I think it's more of a personal. I think she really wants to do more than for countries.
But officially, what is she? If you met her in some social context and you asked why are you here, what would she say?
Set up association.
And what?
She was designed to set up a journalist association in Cambodia.
Yeah, so she has a journalism background herself, and she is also a teacher of journalism. So she wants to make sure that journalism in Cambodia can actually be done. I mean, that's the mission. So that's what we learn about her, right? So all this you mentioned. So she teaches. She's an administrator. She is a caring person. She is committed to the public good. We also learn something about the way she cares. What did we learn about that?
I mean, she cares for all. She's not impartial.
But does she just kind of walk around and give away money to whoever? What do we learn about this? About the kind of compassion that she exercises.
She prioritizes the need
Of the person, yeah, and what person, yeah, what kind of
She
person?
teaches people how to fish rather than just giving them food. She teaches them how to have sustainable, how to work towards.
Yeah. So that's what she does with her journalists, right? So there's one very telling line there. So she is going there to teach because she says if somebody goes there to teach, that is much more enabling for the causes she cares about than when we bring out one or I'm not doing the fishing for you. I'm explaining to you how to build the fish hooks so that you can do the fishing yourself. But that's a spirit. But there's actually more to that. So that's again, this is all by the details of this matter. But this is a report that somebody writes. So Anne herself, so she's now a student at the Kennedy School. And everything that's in there is in there for a reason, right? So she puts that in there as part of the reflection of what happens to her. And there's also certain things that she herself wants to tell us about who she is and what we should know. And she doesn't just talk about how her professionalism and what she's there to do and why that matters and why it matters that she does it this way. But we also, for example, learn in passing that in this war-torn country with so many needy people, she also has made some choices already about how to allocate her attention. So she doesn't just connect to anybody who might be in need of assistance. She gives money to people who are maimed by the war only if she knows the story. There's so much possibility for abuse, manipulation. People are fielded into begging, even though they could be learning a trade or things like that. Right? She's very conscientious, very reflective about all of that. So that's what we learn about Anne, and of course it's Anne who has this question then in the end, could she pay for Chantou? But before getting to Chantou, there's a number of other, so just fairly few other characters. Lee, who is Lee? What do we learn about Lee?
He's a journalist.
Journalist, yeah. Learn, say more.
He's a journalist.
And what happens to him? Is he a happy-go-lucky kind of journalist? Or?
He got injured after the tragedy attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. And requires he actually committed to a local hospital, which couldn't perform the operation on time. And he needs to be transferred to another hospital in another city.
Yeah. So Lee gets blown up at that rally, and then so Lee is one of Anne's charges, right? So he's involved with her teaching operation. One important thing also, so the event where the bombs explode, how are journalists involved in that? So journalists are getting injured. Do they just happen to be there when the bomb explodes, or there's something we learn about how journalists are involved in that event?
So they're trying to kill the journalists so that they will not report on what's going to next.
So that's one thing that also kind of goes by fairly quickly in the case, but as we, in a moment we'll start thinking more seriously about who owes what to whom here, right? So fueled by this question in the end, should I pay for Chantou's leg? But there's other questions that arise here also. What kind of obligations apply? So we have to pay attention to these details also. So we do learn, yes. So the journalists are at the rally. They're covering the rally. But it's not that they just happen to be at that bad place where the bomb exploded. In fact, there's a suggestion in the case that they were actually specifically targeted. Right? So the first attack was specifically against journalists, so that they would be out of commission when the real assault came. So that's what matters about Li. And then Chantou, what do we learn about Chantou? Garment worker, yeah. Why is she in the story? Yeah, they're sharing a room. Yeah. And what else do we know about Chantou? Why is Chantou at the rally? Garment worker. Yeah.
She's part of the union.
She's part of the union, yeah. She is actually, she's not there to cover anybody else's activity. That is her protest.
Yes.
Right? So that's what she does there. And so that's what we learn about her. And then final character here, final major character in an event is Long, the eponymous woman in the corridor. Yeah, so what do we learn about Long?
She's with disability. She can't communicate.
Yeah, she's mentally handicapped, right? She's somehow at the state of development of a 4-year-old child, right? Something like that we learn, yeah. So how does Anne get connected to her?
She was just lying outside the corridor whereby whenever she walked past to visit Chantou.
Yeah.
She saw this carrying her.
No family reason.
Right. Why is she in the hospital? What happened to her? Accident, yeah. So here's somebody, so very different, so you see they have very different relationships, right? So this is all important to keep in mind as we're warming up to the questions about what kind of obligations, right? So with regard to Li, there's a story, and that's why there's a story why Anne is in Cambodia. There's a reason why she has funds and things like that, right? So Chantou, different kind of connections, at least a connection through the rally, and there's a connection to Li, no matter how loose, right? They're sharing a hospital room, so in terms of how they get connected, there's those things to say. And the interesting thing with regard to Long is this is basically just a plain human-to-human encounter, right? It's kind of a naked humanity sort of encounter that we have there. Yeah? So very different stories there. Okay, so let's go back to the motivating question. I'm curious to get your initial reflections on that now that you've read the case and you have your minds in the Cambodian situation. So if you were in Anne's place, so just to kind of be clear again on what the nature of the question is, so given what you now know about who she is, so think of that as you are a friend, and you somehow there's a technical possibility you're on the phone, right? And she's asking you, at that moment, and you know everything that's been going on, you know all the relevant things about Anne as they have been related to us in this case, and then Anne says, what would you advise me to do given what you know about who I am, what my aspirations are, what I do here? So what's the advice that you would offer?
Well, I'm an economist. From an economics
I know where that's going.
From an economist perspective, it would not make sense to pay for Chantou's leg.
Okay.
However, I now think she's too deeply in, and she now will feel that guilt if she doesn't.
So elaborate on the point. So from an economist perspective, it does not make sense. Why not? She's the primary provider. Right? I mean, she's the sole provider for her family. So it sounds like a good investment.
Well, not really, because you could spend the money in other ways, either in filling out a hospital with more doctors or better equipment, or going back to the original mission, which was trying to fund the education of journalists out there. So she's really lost sight of the objective.
Okay, so she has lost sight of the objective being the professional mission that brought her there. So you're saying once it gets this far down the path of helping somebody who is really not part of that mission at all, actually it's a good phrase, she has lost sight of the objective of that mission. Yeah? So based on that, Michael, you would say now is the time to draw.
From an economist's perspective, but I think morally she's now got so deeply into it that there is no alternative, she's going to have to pay.
Okay, so now you are on the phone. She knows you're an economist, but she also knows you're a friend who tries to stay out of prison, right? So then, as a friend, what would you say to her?
I would say you now know her well, you've got a moral engagement there, and it's probably best for your moral health to pay for the operation.
Or you would actually advise her to do that. You would say, so given the other things that we learn about her, so you would say, I'm an economist, there's reasons against this, but given who you are...
On the one hand and on the other hand.
Okay, but the way the hands come together is the conclusion is, given who you are and given what your aspirations are, even though you also said she lost sight of her mission. Okay, interesting. So what do other people think?
Sometimes we need to draw a line, because if we don't, then we get so involved. A very similar case I'm bombarded in my job scope is this particular stateless student. He's in my program. He has not paid for the fees, and I'm trying to source help, and so people are doing crowdfunding, but help is not coming along the way. So there will come a time where we have to decide whether to remove him because he's not paying the fees. Or, thought has gone through my mind, what about you? Would you pay? I ask myself, would you do your share to just see him through? And there are so many students, and I on one hand, I do have a thought of that, but on the other hand, I told myself, you need to draw a line. And this is, I don't know, if I'm in Anne's place, I would ask, is that the one and the only thing I stop? You don't know when to draw the line.
So one thing about what you just said is that it makes clear how, even though this is a bit of an extreme scenario, given that it plays in a war-torn country and the level of poverty and all that, but what is clear also is that we are interested in this case also because it resonates with things that happen to us, right? So questions where you'd say, this is an encounter kind of on the periphery of what you're actually doing. This leads you out of your way. This might lead you to lose sight of your mission. This is something that's not central to what you do, but still, given that we all operate in very thick professional and also human context, we encounter scenarios like this where we get drawn into something, and we get drawn into it ever more, partly because we are trying so hard to do the right thing. Right? If we were callous people and didn't care, we would just not have noticed her in the corridor or whatever the parallel scenario would be. Right? But since we do care, we get drawn into this, and then several steps down the line, you come to this question that the way you put it, Ruth, is where do I draw that line then? Right? Where would this end? Yeah. So would you say, if you were the friend on the phone, would you say, Anne, speaking as your friend, this is where you should? Yeah. You seem to be nodding also.
I'm actually quite agree because during this difficult time, Anne helped her to transfer the different hospitals. In this difficult time, she already provides some real supports. So there is other other organization or related association need to the other family support to these victims, not just Anne, her own person to help a lot of people.
Yeah. So you're saying it's not just that she may have reached the end of the line here, but she is actually, as a person, burdened with something that's clearly a structural problem. Yeah? And so within a structural problem, she has already gone far out of her way. And so now it's just there's something that's distinctly unfair about this, right? That all of a sudden the weight of all of this would be on her. So you would tell her on the phone then, nah, don't do it. It's you would nicely say don't do it. Okay. Yeah.
I look at it this way. In terms of her helping, I find that she goes deeper to see the family's background. And in Chantou's case, if she loses her leg, she's going to have a problem supporting her family. So, and for economic sense, that she be sustainable, able to sustain her family, I would say if Anne has got the funds, pay for it.
Okay, so
I take that view.
Okay, so what's the reasoning? So what you emphasized just now was Chantou is really an important person in her family.
Yes,
right? And so
she's like a breadwinner. Her husband is like a second wife and not taking care of them. So if she's bedridden, what's going to happen? She's immobile.
Yeah.
Not so mobile. What's going to happen?
Yeah. So we're actually getting Chantou's life situation in a fair amount of detail, right? Also emphasizing, how the family has had a fair amount of bad luck anyway, right? And what little luck they have left, so to speak, in their lives really depends on Chantou's ability to actually do physical labor. And if she loses a leg, then basically her social capital, her ability to contribute to anything that's realistically in the cards for her is lost. So that's interesting. So your angle is actually very different from what we just discussed.
Of course, provided she can still afford it because she is like so stretched, helping so many people already. Yeah.
So you're emphasizing interestingly different features of this case, right? So your point was to say, this really is a structural problem. And Ruth, this also resonated with what you were saying, right? So there's
I think generally, if we can and we can help, we truly want to. But on one hand, we don't want to get so involved, and you don't know when are you going to stop, because I truly think it is not so simple as to just dish out.
Right. But then we get the competing point to that. So when are you going to stop? And then you would say, Jane, you would say not here yet, because you had these two considerations. One thing you said, this person, Chantou, is too important to her context to stop now. And your second point was, Anne still could sell, I don't know, an old garage and wherever she comes from, and she could still make a difference.
Because once she is up on her feet and able on her own, I think that's where Anne can stop. Because if she's going to be in that state, Chantou is in that state, needing her all the time, I think Anne will have an even more, always wondering how Chantou doing, how Chantou doing. But if her leg is back in shape and she can fend on herself, I think maybe Anne will get some peace of mind. Insofar as Chantou is concerned, that's my take. You can only touch one life at a time sometimes. So if you come close and the opportunity is presented to you to help that person, there will be lots of people out there. I'm also facing situations, I get a lot of appeals, but it's also the same thing.
Okay, so you're also thinking also, going back to the scenario, you being the friend on the phone, so what you probably would tell her then on the phone is not the stuff about how important Chantou is and how Anne can still afford, but you basically try to read Anne as a character, and you'd say, you will not find peace unless you do this. And leads us back, of course, in a way to the point of well, but it's in a way it kind of leads to a certain tragic assessment of the situation. Right? It means if you actually are a caring person and your friends know this about you, then you are, the burden you carry is right. So basically, once you're known, to not find peace of mind unless you do more good, man, you're in for quite bit of responsibility here. Right?
Yes.
What do other people think? Yeah.
Yeah, I will be sharing from the perspective of working in healthcare industry. I'm in Sunway Medical Center, so it's a private hospital where patient needs to pay for their bills. So in this case, probably we can come up with some win-win situation that and would not really need to pay, and then Chantou will get her operation done. Because in this case, Chantou did not want to go back to the previous hospital. Probably can encourage Anne to persuade her to whether she can go back to the previous hospital to seek treatment, which may not be that expensive. Because I think ethical-wise, we still need to help patients who need the help, especially if they require the surgery or the operation urgently. But if the cost is an issue, then we probably can advise to see other options that can come up with a situation.
I think you're speaking too much of like a medical professional based in the KL area. Imagine you say this to her on the phone. She said, listen, remember, I'm in Cambodia. I'm at the end of the line here. Would you say all that as advice? What would you advise?
Maybe advise her to go back to the previous hospital to seek treatment.
Well, they have. Yeah, she is.
Because
she's kind of, yeah.
But because it didn't really mention here why she did not want to go back.
Well, what?
Why Chantou did not want to go back to the previous hospital.
Well, it's not so much at this. The primary issue is not which hospital she will go to, but it's clear that she needs that money. Right? I mean, there's also some issues about clearly medical care is not as reliably provided in that scenario as of course you guys do. So, Pekyan, what is your take as a medical professional? If you were the friend, what would you?
I won't really advise what Anne need to do because it's her option, but I will give maybe my opinion. But at last, actually, it's Anne's decision what to do. Frankly speaking, I myself won't pay for the fee.
You would do it?
No,
I won't do it.
I won't.
Okay, yeah.
Because I was thinking, how many people that we can provide this kind of monetary support? Like economics wise, actually, I won't. But maybe there's another option like we can collect funds from other organizations, or maybe we can share the story so that we can collect some monetary support from public where Chantou can successfully go through the operation.
Yeah. Well, I see what you're doing. You kind of try to broaden the horizon and to say there might be other ways of solving the problem. And of course, in many cases, that's exactly we have a big problem here. We don't know what to do. And of course, then creative thinking needs to come in to think outside the box and who else can be involved. That's generally a good move. But this is also again why the thickness of the case matters, right? So in this case, as far as that particular scenario with Chantou's leg at this stage is concerned, she can't wait for some grander coalition of the willing to take over the burden, right? So in spite of all the concerns also about the structural failings that it's really not, so she needs to make a call without having any prospect of being able to turn it over to this kind of organization. But since we are broadening the horizon a little bit, let's one other interesting feature of this case, the way it's written up, is we're also getting a fair amount of cues from the environment. So Anne is doing things there, and you may also want to think a little bit about the let's say political dynamics or the dynamics coming from the fact that she's clearly a Western person, either American or Canadian or maybe English. So she is navigating a hospital scene in Cambodia, and she is clearly in a position to navigate the hospital scene in Cambodia in a way in which no Cambodian ever could. So notice there's that dimension also not to be lost sight of entirely. But in addition, there's also reactions. There's in a way advice coming in from the environment. Yeah? So there's a context there in which this unfolds, and the context, the social setting, is also replete with advice. Yeah? So this is not just there's not just people around. There's people who have attitudes that are reflecting how such things are done and regarded in Cambodia. Yeah? So what did you pick up about that? What kind of advice did the environment suggest, either about Chantou or also about Long? It's actually more about Long than the environment offers advice. Or put differently, what would other Cambodians think about all this?
If it's not a member of your family, then it's really not your problem. The family is expected to care.
Yeah, we get that a number of times, right? That people in the environment are signaling to her, why are you doing that? So who, for example, who gives this signal?
The foreign counterparts,
Yeah. So other foreign healthcare professionals are somewhat flabbergasted by what she's doing, right? So that she's and who else? So there's these are characters that are in the Long orbit more than in the Chantou orbit. So who are the people in Long's orbit who are kind of commenting on the wisdom of helping Long?
It was the nurse, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the nurse, we already mentioned. There's a couple of other people. This is also this kind of thing that happens very much in passing in the story, and you might well not.
But I think when she solicited she managed to get help from the nun as well to help her out.
The nuns, yeah. But who does much of the legwork for Long when Anne has to deal with her other obligations? Who is actually helping out?
Long's sister.
Long's sister arrives eventually, but before. Yeah. So Lee's wife and Chantou's mother get enlisted into doing this. Yeah? And they're going along partly in a way. Anne is the authority figure in this case, right? So Anne pulls the strings. And Anne makes it also very clear that she thinks that that a certain kind of responsiveness is owed to her. I do good things here. I expect you to kind of help along with the burden. But you can also see from how this unfolds that Lee's wife and Chantou's mother are not happy about this. So what happens to them? Why are they not happy about this?
Because they fall into the old system.
They want to look at their own problems first. They want to help their own.
Yeah, they're falling asleep on the bedside of the person they're actually there to help, right? And they are probably also Chantou's mom, right? I mean, who's providing, for them while they are both there, right? And in addition, she is being asked to help out with another case of somebody whom they're not only not connected to, but who is so mentally behind that she's not even sitting there, aching for help. She just misses out on much of what's happening in the first place. Right? So we're getting that kind of signal. So about the Long case, how do you feel about that? So Chantou, Chantou is the one interesting thing about the case is also it ends with a Chantou question: would you pay? Right?
But it doesn't ask about Long.
It doesn't ask about Long, even though of course our attention is being drawn to Long. Why? Well, no, I mean, it's just because the title of the whole thing, right? So you read the title, The Woman in the Corridor, and you kind of wonder who's the woman in the corridor. It's not Chantou, right? So at least Chantou has a room. She's the woman in the room, right? So the woman in the corridor is actually Long. So, are you okay with it?
Yeah, I'm okay. So cold, I can't stand the cold.
Okay, that's a minor problem. Right? Okay, so what about Long? Do you think that? Especially now that we discussed, the reactions coming from Lee's wife and Chantou's mother, do you think she is doing the right thing when it comes to Long? And what does she herself say about it actually?
Long is definitely a victim of the circumstances in Cambodia, where she was actually taken advantage of, and she's actually due to a mental illness, she didn't know what is actually going on. And the environment itself, like Chantou, the mom was actually
him. But for Lom, it was difficult for people to find which hospital, and eventually it takes time for them to reach to where she is. Yeah. So I think the environment factor has affected her very much.
Okay, so yeah, so we know bad things happen to Lom, and to some extent that is because there's unfortunate circumstances in place in Cambodia. Yeah. So, but in terms of Anne's involvement with Lom, there's one quite striking passage where we actually learn what she would say back. There's a little bit of reflection that she has also about her own basic religious commitments. Yeah. So what does she say?
Is Anne asking me as a friend now again that I'm supposed to advise her?
No, in this case it's me asking you what's in the text.
Because what's interesting was with the previous question, I think it's very different if I'm put in Anne's place or am I the friend of Anne and she's asking me. Because if I'm the friend, I'm entitled to be a little selfish and a little selfish on Anne's behalf. To advise her to be, things like to tell her, you should get out of there because I'm not there. I'm not in a position. I'm not as invested as she is. And as a friend, I would definitely, my priorities would be her welfare or her well-being. That's the first priority. So I advise her to get out of that place. And the question with Chantou's leg and Lom's whether she should be sterilized or not, I think that question is entirely very different and it's so much more difficult to make a decision for Lom's case than Chantou's case actually. So to advise her on Lom, if you ask me now, then as a friend I wouldn't know how to answer whether or not she should make that decision.
But what do we learn? So that's actually a very good reflection on your role as a friend.
Yeah.
But so suppose you are in this conversation now with her and you learn about Lom. What would Anne tell you, according to the account in the case, why she wants to do this for Lom?
Is it still on whether she should get her sterilized or not?
No. There's one paragraph, right? Where
Being a human being, she needs to be served with dignity.
Yeah. So there's these things. This is quite an interesting, very moving part of the case, right? Where she is basically confronted by the environment. Why are you interested in helping her? And of course, what they also have in the back of their minds is, why are we getting enlisted into helping you do this? And then she starts thinking of things from the New Testament about the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan is exactly that character who, it's a story in the Bible where somebody walks by and finds the victim of an assault that had been ignored by various other people, not just by any other people, but kind of clergy, dignitaries, but the Good Samaritan goes out of her way and helps somebody in need anyway, and so she comes up with that which for her is an interesting kind of bit of cultural background, because she also says I'm a third generation, atheist, and here I am thinking of the Good Samaritan parable, so really as a self-documentation about cultural background. But then she also says these things, because she is a woman, because she's a human being. No woman should be lying like this in a hospital corridor with all these, guys looking on and getting a kick out of that this poor girl is lying there and is barely covered, right? And is basically then, in the course of the time, more and more covered in her own feces, right? So it's because nothing happened. And then she just makes this very basic appeal to shared humanity. So why am I supposed to do this? So you see we learn quite a bit about the substance of the connections here, right? So to harness that, let's go a little bit more systematic about this at this stage to introduce some vocabulary, and then we'll come back to that. So one notion, so in terms of introducing a framework, one notion that I'd like to start with is that of the normative environment. So normative environment is a fairly important term to have ready as you think about ethics from the standpoint of practical ethics, from the standpoint of being a practical agent in the midst of a certain situation. And so as you find yourself in the midst of a certain situation, the situation is there's not just a bunch of other people and kind of background facts, but there is actually something that you could sensibly call normative environment. So let me give you a somewhat simple-minded sketch here. So environment, so there's a lot of people here. You can easily understand why I did not pursue my early childhood ambitions of drawing. So, but this is really, these are the things that matter most, right? So this is there's a moral environment, there's an environment here, so that's, first of all, that means there's other people around you. You are the agent, the red figure is the agent, there's other people around you. But it's not just that, it's not just there's other people. What makes this a normative environment, or what the sense that it makes to talk about the normative environment is that the context of agency in which you're operating. So for all of you, a professional context, and for all of us also a citizenship context, that we are citizens of countries, we live in a certain profession, we are fellow humans with other human beings. So all of this is defining the context of agency. And within a context of agency, we have norms and values that apply. Right? So norms, so statements of the sort, the following ought to be done, and values, things that we care about, aspire for. So things like that hold in a normative environment. So in a normative environment, it's not just in a way the naked presence of a number of people, but commitments that are shared among them. So there's a number of relevant actors that matter specifically for the problem at hand. And then, so there's a range of questions that you, once you have a problem, that you can ask about that problem. You can ask, who are the relevant actors here? As we started to do in the woman in the corridor case, right? Who are the relevant actors whose voices matter? With regard to whom may I have obligations? With regard to whom do I have permission to do things? And whose voices matter? Who needs to be heard on these things? So I also know there is then in the normative environment there's a range of roles and commitments that apply. You know? So there's people. So in this case, Anne, the central character, has a number of personal commitments. Other people have personal commitments. Anne also has professional obligations. Other people have professional obligations. We have tried to unearth this a little bit, what this all amounts to. They have different kinds of obligations. So all of that is meant by normative environment. So what are the relevant actors for the question at hand? What kind of commitments matter? What kind of relationships do they have? These are questions you would want to ask. And then very important for this idea of a normative environment, what is the source of authority here? You know? Why do these commitments apply? Why do these relationships come with certain obligations or permissions, and what? So that's another question that you. So these are the questions that you're asking by understanding a situation from within, right? So what is your problem here? What is the question? Just as in this case, the question is already identified, but often identifying the question itself is not that easy. So in this case, the story ends with a question: should I pay? You know? And so that defines the situation we are currently in. And then we are trying to identify, when we're asking a number of questions about this context, and it's this kind of questions, these questions in particular that we are asking. And then we can think about this. Once we have this notion on the radar, and this general idea that there is something like a normative environment with norms and values, and with understandings about sources of authority. Once we have that general idea, we can ask about this in a somewhat more fine-grained way. Right? And so this comes next. And once I give you the scheme, we'll go back to the case and look at the roles again, because the scheme might actually help with that. So we have Anne. Anne finds herself in this particular normative environment. Again, people have commitments, people have relationships. It's because of these relationships that they have obligations, right? And again, we have to ask, what is the source of these obligations? Who confers authority? Generally, what this means also, so one implication of this approach to ethics in terms of asking about normative environment is there's a certain conservative dimension to that. Yeah? So you find yourself in a certain environment, and you make the basic assumption that things work the way they work there, authority structures are the way they are, relationships are the way they are, assignments of obligations and permissibilities are the way they are for some reason. So may not be a reason that you want to stick with, may not be something that you feel carries the day at the end in terms of what authority goes into this, but it's a good first approach to understand your situation from within in terms of understanding relevant actors, relationships, values, commitments, and sources of authority, with an understanding that there's good reason why they do things that way where you operate. So first understand what is going on, try to identify the sources of authority, give them the benefit of the doubt, and then maybe later we'll get more radical and we say none of this makes any sense, but we can only say that really once we understand what's actually happening and once we dissect the obligations in a little bit more detail. And so what's then very helpful in a case especially of a working professional like Anne is to think of different kinds of obligations and different kinds of relationships that she has. So Anne is a person with certain ambitions and a certain, her conscience tells her certain things. She wants to be a certain person in life. So Jane, in your points, this became clear, right? So what does it take for her to have peace of mind? What does her conscience require? What are her personal aspirations? What does integrity? What is integrity in her case? Integrity literally means oneness. Right? So remaining one person that is not broken down into competing component parts. What does this take for Anne to make it through the situation without feeling that she is no longer who she is and who she wants to be? So there's personal commitments that somebody has. How do I see myself in the world? So conscience. But then there's also codes of ethics. So we are in certain fields. We work in medicine. We work for law. We work for a certain company. We might be journalists. We might be teachers. And anything that's recognizably a profession has codes of conduct, has norms, has professional norms, which ultimately are role models, right? So you can think of that in terms of role models. Here's what it means to be a good doctor. Here's what it means to be a good teacher. Here's what it means to be a good journalist, right? And so there's some people that are pointed out to us that we might have in front of us. So probably most of you who work in professions have somebody in mind and you say, I want to be like this, right? And then you can think about this somewhat alternatively and say there's certain kind of general codes of conduct, so things that we are asked not to do, that people in that profession are asked not to do or are asked to do. So all of this would be codes of ethics that apply to a particular profession. And the third one is that that there's a public dimension to all of this. So we approach the world with a conscience, with personal goals. We live in the world as professionals, but then we also live in these larger contexts. And so there's multiple of those. So we live in a particular country. Most of you are Malaysian citizens, right? So you live in Malaysia. You live in a political community with certain features. But there's another dimension also to your public lives, namely there's a religious or moral code also in the background, right? So there's both law and morality in the public domain. You might be Muslims and you might see yourself integrated into what the Quran and the Islamic tradition say, right? Or you might be Christians and you take your cues from the Bible and the particular church that you belong to. So all of that would be in this last category here. And then you can fill this in, these three columns, also in terms of spelling out these themes a little bit more. So what is it that I need to be thinking about as I'm trying to figure out what is my personal, how do I see myself in the world? Well, I need to think about what personal ideas and beliefs do I have, right? Where do I want to go in life? What defines me as a person? As far as the professional is concerned, I have to reflect a little bit about what's the what is the organizational mission here, right? What are we trying to accomplish here? And then, as far as the public dimension is concerned, I think about what's going on, right? What is the law? What are local regulations? What are the moral theories in the background here, which might just be religious theories, or if you see yourself as an adherent to, you know, a certain philosophical outlook. Right? So all of that defines your situation, and the kind of relationships you have with people then are also determined thereby, and they're complex, right? So as a person with certain ambitions, you have a social context that consists of your family, you know, by nature, so to speak, or by choice, to the extent that this is by marriage or in-laws and all that, right? Or otherwise through associations that you move in because you are a certain kind of person and want to become a certain kind of person. So that's one kind of social context you have. In a professional situation, you are in client and colleague relationships. There are certain things that you know, I owe to some people in the world because we belong to the same institution. These are not things I owe to you because we do not belong to the same institution. But you belong to the same institution with other people, and so you have these kind of professional associations, or you have clients, you are in some construction project, and there are certain things that you owe to, you know, to get this right, but at the same time you owe something to, you know, to the company that you work for. So these are those relationships. And then in the public domain, so there's shared citizenship, other Malaysians as Muslims, there's the Ummah, you know, what do you have to do to live up to the community of the faithful. And so in a way we all have rather complicated lives in this way, right? So and it's fascinating, right? You should get up every once in a while, look in the mirror in the morning and say, hey, this is the complexity, you know, of my life. And you know, it's both a source of strength and a source of burdens, right? That our lives are so complicated, given that they are driven by the personal dimensions, the professional dimensions, and the public dimensions. Yeah? So these are distinctions here. And now one can actually go back to Anne's scenario. And so let's go back. We actually did a fair amount of ground clearing work already by understanding the different relationships that are going in here. Yeah? So using these distinctions that we just made, how would you think this through for Anne's obligations to lead? Not so much now in terms of coming to a bottom line conclusion. So earlier I asked you what would you recommend as a friend as a bottom line conclusion, but now we're doing something slightly different, namely now that you have seen the scheme that I just put there, and you saw the distinction between these different kinds of obligations. So now let's try to understand in more detail what are the kind of obligations that Anne has to lead. How would we describe them in terms of that scheme?
Her personal conscience.
With Lee? Really? That's what you want to say?
Professional.
Remember, Lee is the student. Yeah. So with Lee, so spell it out some more. So Lee is the student. Why is there? How can one argue that Lee is actually somebody for whom Anne needs to do something?
Because her mission is to help the journalists first, then the non-journalists, because they're part of the association.
Yeah.
Also have an approved fund to help the
funds, yeah. So that's why she's there. That's the story, right? That's the narrative that goes into explaining her presence there in the first place. That's also why in this case she's there on a UN mission, right? So the UN actually, you know, the UN doesn't drown her in money. It's not like that, but there is a certain allocation.
She draws a salary from UN.
She is, yeah. So that's what she does. So this is the organizational mission, right? So you know, this is what she's there for, which of course also then reflects on, you know, the other issues, right? So the more she does things for people like Lom and Chantou, the more, Michael put it, what he said at the very beginning, she's losing sight of her mission, right? So the more she's doing other things, the more she's not doing what she's there to do, given how thinly stretched she is with everything, the more she really is losing sight of her mission and not living up to that. Yeah? So on professional grounds, one can spell this out fairly nicely why Lee really is a clear target for obligations that Anne has. Yeah. what about next character? And of course, in Lee's case, it also, so Lee is really kind of a pristine case. It's really fairly easy because not only is he exactly the kind of person for whose advancement Anne is there to begin with, but he actually, remember, got injured in the line of duty. Remember, this is why actually this matters that journalists didn't just happen to be there where the bomb fell, they were actually targeted. Right? So this is why it's really a premier obligation that she has. So what about Chantou? How would you describe the kind of obligation that Anne has towards Chantou in terms of the scheme that we...
It's definitely about
Humanity.
Humanity, yeah?
It's a personal obligation because she saw her at the first place. She doesn't have to do anything to help her, but because she saw Chantou and Anne just thought she needed to help her, and at the same time transferred to the other hospital with Lee. So to begin with, it's a personal obligation for herself, for conscience.
Yeah. So definitely a strong human connection there. So actually it's an interesting case whether you, in terms of the scheme that I just showed you, is this a conscience thing or is it a morality thing? Yeah, so conscience as in my personal ambitions. I want to be this kind of person and that's what I do. And morality would be, I have the following, that's for simplicity's sake, religious commitments, right? And I interpret my obligations as a Muslim in the following way. So these would be different things. And so all these human obligations, of course, are more strongly pronounced in Lom's case. And so what is fascinating about Lom's case, it really is this naked humanity that we have there. But with Chantou, you could actually say other things also. So you could ask, so for example, the fact that does it matter, question for you, does it matter, do the following things matter, that Anne is actually clearly sympathetic to the political causes behind Chantou's doing. Yeah? So Chantou is at this rally, Anne is not supposed to be having favorites, but clearly she's not there to advance the greater good of Hun Sen, the Prime Minister. She's there because she's actually also sympathetic to the opposition, so she has sympathies there. So you could argue, is there a ground to help, are there grounds to helping Chantou because of that? Is she obligated to watch Chantou because of how they met, because of the story? So Anne with Anne it's not pure humanity with Anne and Chantou, right? So they meet in that hospital room and then she gets invested more and more. Is this a source of obligation that she gets invested more and more? If I said to you something like this, I said to you in terms of, so I'm not quite actually sure how to put that into the scheme that might be, so let's try to make it a moral point. I would say to you, in terms of moral obligations, you, Anne, actually are obligated to Chantou because you have gotten involved with her life, right? So you have helped her this far along. So you have built a relationship, you have built commitments with her, and it's now in the nature of these commitments that simply come from the shared story that you have with her, that you should help her at the next stage. So that's how I could spin this as a moral story. But how would you feel about that?
Would that make her lose sight of her other obligations? Like right now, there are more journalists hurt that she was supposed to be helping. If she gets invested in Chantou's case, would she just be like, she might as well just be Chantou's personal caretaker at this point?
Yeah, but then more directly to the question I asked, so I tried to build a positive case for obligation to Chantou by saying she has helped her these several steps before. Do you think that is actually a source of obligation? I'm sure many of you would actually feel that, right? So one reason why Chantou is a tough case is because we are where we are, so we, as an Anne and Chantou, we are where we are because of the shared history, right? I've helped you before. And is this then...
So she won't abandon.
Is it something like a social relationship? Because you are there at the same event,
Yeah.
the same rally, do you feel connected to help
Yeah.
this person? Because you see, I think Anne saw, what's her name?
Chantou.
Anne saw Chantou
Yeah.
holding the banner at that event, so she
Yeah.
felt connected.
So okay, Chantou is in terms of the scheme. Chantou is an interesting case because you can actually find various places for her in the three columns, right? So Lee is very squarely placed in the professional middle column, right? And with Chantou you could indeed tell different stories. So I try to tell the moral story that they build a relationship, and in terms of human contact within kind of growing relationships that generates obligations because we have been involved before. I need to do things for you at the next stage, right? And so, but you're doing something interestingly different. You are saying we can understand that in terms of her own ideas, because Anne is also a person committed to certain political ambitions for Cambodia, and Chantou clearly shares those. So okay, good. So that's why Chantou is so complex, because it happens in these two columns. Now you could of course also say, so one reason why ultimately my own take on Chantou is really that she should actually resist this temptation, and that we should also resist this temptation, because in terms of the personal idea story, I think it's important to your point, Danny, in terms of how does this conflict with her professional obligation. I think is a good one here, namely, so she is there because she is on a professional mission, right? And part of her professional mission actually precisely is to downplay political sympathies. Remember, there's one other character that we haven't really touched on, is the technician. So at some point she travels to another part of the country to support a technician that worked for a radio station or some station that's actually sympathetic to the government, right? So she goes out of her way to do that. So there's these political sympathies, in a way, the sheer reason why she's there should actually undermine her sympathy to that. And the other point, this point about, I think this is also kind of a structural thing that we encounter in life, right? Do I need to stay involved with somebody because we have been involved this far? And this can be quite complicated, right? When we encounter these questions in very personal relationships and professional relationships, and one question that is always helpful to ask: if we hadn't done together what we have done together, what else would have happened to you? What else would you have done? So in this case, for example, if you say, if the point is Chantou should be helped, Anne should help Chantou because they have kind of moved along for a while, they have built this context. So that, to my mind, is actually a bad reason, because it's not like Chantou was losing out on any other opportunities. So Chantou would simply have gotten shipwrecked at an earlier stage. So it's not that Anne owes her anything just because they have been moving along. It would be different if Anne initiated some kind of treatment, and then something goes wrong with that treatment. Then you could say, okay, so Anne has a causal connection to a problem that now is upon Chantou, but that's not the case here, right? So with Chantou, I think there's very little actually to say as to why she should. To my mind, she shouldn't pay actually for such reasons. And with regard to Lom, so with Lom is interesting because this is happening really entirely in the moral column, in terms of the common humanity that they share. But that's also then where the stuff about the normative environment comes in. So what are we doing here? Well, we are thinking about normative environment, right? As we got the general concept of normative environment inside. We looked at that three-column scheme to get a better understanding of what it's like to be Anne, in that context. But remember, one thing I also emphasized is understanding normative environment. We must always also keep in mind what are the sources of authority here, right? So what does the environment itself reflect on these different roles that Anne is playing? Yeah? And that matters quite substantially here for the third column, the law and morality, column because Anne's personal ideals are, what they are. She brings them along. Her professional obligations are what they are. She brings them along. But what her legal and moral obligations are, there you could make a case and say, well, when in Rome, do as the Romans, so pay attention, right? Pay attention to what they, in the first line of analysis. Again, you might overrule that, but what does the environment actually tell you? And the environment here actually, that's where one can also get critical a little bit about her role as a, as a white person from the West coming into Cambodia and navigating the healthcare system in Cambodia like nobody else could there. Right? So you can get a little bit critical about that situation also. But in particular, you can also say, so it's you can say to Anne, look, it's great that you feel this strong moral urge to help, along, but you have also to understand that as you do that, you are going against fairly clearly formulated advice by the normative environment. Right? The normative environment is simply not supportive of that. And the point is that, again, war-stricken country, decades of misery, decades of trouble, everybody's stretched very thinly, and you can actually be very critical with Anne and say, you come in here as a, as an outside do-gooder, and you are drawing people into your activities here, and they are overburdened as it stands, right? So they don't know how to finish their days, having food on the table for anyone they're obligated to, right? So the normative environment here, and the way authority is conferred in the normative environment, what people normally do and the reasons they have for doing that, is very strongly negative about Anne's helping Long and supporting her. Yeah, so this is something you. This is something. So in terms of a scheme, in terms of understanding a moral situation, we are interested in this case as one case study. Right? Here's a situation that allows us to introduce some analytical vocabulary. Right? And so that was the point of talking to you about normative environment. Try to understand who the relevant actors are, what the relevant relationships are, what the norms are people are committed to, and what the sources of authority are behind all of that, right? Just to get the lay of the land. And then in the next stage, we looked at this scheme, understanding a person's situation. So normative environment was trying to understand the whole thing in normative dimensions, in terms of what are the norms and values implied here. In a second level of analysis, we introduced that scheme, the personal, the professional, the public, by way of looking at the person more clearly, more distinctly, what kind of obligations do I have here? Right? So that's what. And then we spelled this out a little bit for the different dimensions of Anne's scenario. But then there's one third stage in this. So it's a three-layer analysis that I'm proposing to you here. 3 layers. So first, understand normative context. Second layer is to understand the different roles that you have yourself and the nature that come out of these different roles. And then there's the third layer is to actually think about questioning the normative environment. Yeah? So far this has been a bit of a conservative exercise. So try to understand the situation from within. You as you read this case, but also you as you find yourself in a new life situation. Yeah? Try to get the hang of the normative environment, but the conservative approach is always a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, you want to acknowledge things are the way they are for reasons that in many cases are not just arbitrary. I mean, in some cases it's just some brute exercise of power. But often there's good reasons why standards operate the way they do in a certain environment, right? But you may ask how can we question somewhat fundamentally what is going on in an environment, and then you can bring in at this third level of analysis, you can bring in what I call others. So this term others. This is a usage from sociology. So others are people. So this term is used differently in different academic niches. So you have this sometimes in an area called post-colonial studies, where the other is somehow the person from a colony, and from the standpoint of the colonizer is just this other and expresses this kind of estrangement, right? That's not the point here actually. In sociology, there's a different use of other, namely an other is somebody we turn to get advice to be ourselves better, to be as good as we can for ourselves. You know? So typical others are psychologists, psychoanalysts. You know, if you have the kind of problem that would benefit from a therapist, right? So a therapist is another in this sense. A medical doctor is another in the sense, and the person who helps you to be as good as you can be. A teacher is another. In this case, I'm your other. Right? So for this moment, I'm your other. So others are people who are coming in from the outside, and you can turn to them. You can turn to any kind of input they may have. So in this case, as we understand normative environment, the others are people who are giving you some kind of input to question the way the normative environment works in the first place. Yeah? So, and one way of developing that story, there's different things one can do here for this case, but there's a distinctive line of work in my field, in political and moral philosophy, that explores the nature of what rightness and wrongness consists in the first place. You mentioned this earlier, in nature of right and wrong. And so that's what moral philosophers do. They offer theories about what does it mean for something to be right? What does it mean for something to be wrong? Yeah? And so these guys here, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, are among the founding fathers of a moral philosophy orientation called utilitarianism. Yeah? Utilitarianism. So utilitarianism, these are utilitarianism. So what these guys are saying is the right thing to do is always to bring as much well-being into the world as you can. You know? So it's designed to be a theory of right and wrong. What is the right thing to do? Well, every day get up and think about what can I do to contribute as much well-being or happiness, I'm using this synonymously now, welfare to the world as you can, right? So how can you bring a maximum amount of happiness into the world? And wrongness is everything else. You're doing the wrong thing if you're not doing that. You know? Now, notice this is a theory that is very easy to state. What's the right thing to do? Bring as much happiness into the world as you can. But it actually comes with a lot of interesting complexities, right? So you can say, well, am I doing this on a day-to-day basis? Am I seeing this over a lifetime? What if I want to go to school for a few years and take myself out of commission thereby, right? So there's complexities which we don't have time to explore. I'm just giving this to you at this stage by way of giving you a general way of approaching moral problems. Again, the three-stage process, right? So understanding normative environment generally. Second, understanding these three different categories of obligations that a person has in that context. And the third stage would be to turn to advice from the outside world, you know, from kind of theory experts. You know? And I'm not saying that in this case what you have to do is you have to turn to utilitarians, but this is one way we could proceed now, right? So I could say, I'm a friend and I studied philosophy. I'd say, well, Anne, now that you understand all of this, you understand the normative environment, you understand your different kind of obligations, maybe that's all too conservative. Maybe you should turn to the grander theories, and one candidate grander theory set here is these utilitarians, and they are others here. They're standing on the outside of this. They have nothing to do with Cambodia, with Anne's particular situation, but they have things to say that would bear on what Anne is interested in, right? And she might say, I need to figure out what I can do as a person to bring as much happiness into the world as I can. You know? Notice that also doesn't conclusively settle the matter here. This also actually goes back to what Michael said at the beginning about the economist standpoint. Your economist standpoint is also a utilitarian standpoint, right? So economics as a discipline emerged actually in the 19th century alongside utilitarianism also as a discipline. So you can then Anne is there, and so now Anne is wondering about if she is sympathetic to the utilitarian standpoint, what is the best thing I can do to bring happiness into the world? And then it depends a bit on her life circumstances, right? Maybe she can say, well, I really can spare another $4,000. I can actually do this, and in that case, I do preserve the livelihood of this one family. You know, maybe she can say that, and then from a utilitarian standpoint, then that's what she should do. Or she can say, if I'm now doing this, then I lose my possibility of doing what I meant to do at the next stage, namely to go back to school for, as she did, right? Went to the Kennedy School, and then someone think, you know, I can actually bring more happiness into the world by saving this money, letting that money contribute to my next life goal, and then move on from there. Yeah. So let's finish this up now, but I'm going to come back to this material at the beginning of our next session. So just to sum up where we are and where I'll be reconnecting to this. So we're interested in this case, in cases like this, also the next case, the prison master case, to understand the situation from within, right? And to draw inferences for our own life situations by understanding other people's problems, and then, you know, draw inferences from there. And what we have started to do now is to give you this 3-layer analysis in terms of A, understand the normative environment. So that's the macro context. B, analyze your situation in terms of different roles, right? The personal, the professional, and the public. And then C, once you have all that, to see whether there's any others, any providers of theory, any providers of more systematic advice who have input to make here that would also be helpful for the decision itself. You know? So the main thing about all of this is, the main thing is not that we agree on a conclusion to draw here. The main thing about all of this is that this is a certain framework, right, that you can use to order your thoughts about this. You know? So I'll come back to that for a few minutes at the beginning of our next session. So our next session is at what? 1:10. 1 p.m. So at 1 p.m. So if you haven't finished reading the Prison Master's Dilemma, please find some time in the next 56 minutes to share that activity with food consumption. Okay, good. See you at 1.
Matthias,
yeah.
2 questions.
Yes.
First one, simple economics question. What is a UN salary? How much does she earn a month?
I have no idea.
Okay, second question, what does she actually do? Do you know?
She went to the Kennedy School. She did not help her. Okay. Yeah, she did not actually help her. And she was actually haunted by that. That's why she wrote this album.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, isn't it?
You just regret that, right? Yeah.
Well, no. So she was haunted by it. I do not know her personally. So I know that she did not help her. I know she came to the Kennedy School. I know that she was haunted by it. And, you know, regret. I mean, somebody said earlier in the introductory round, you also, you know, want to understand how to live with the decision. You might be haunted by a decision, but you might not regret it, right? Because you had good reasons, you know. But sometimes life is tragic in the sense that there is no good choice, right? So you might be haunted, but you had your good reasons to do it, and you just have to live with the pain. But you shouldn't have regret, as in you should not have done it differently. And that, I think, was a situation like that. But yeah, crossroad is a good term. And then a crossroad, in a way, defines you, right? So decision making is also a way of saying, I could be this person, I could be that person. I became that person. I had my reasons not to be this person, and there's some, you know, bad feelings about this still, but I know why I did it. Good. See you soon.